Hey again, YouTube. Back with another PlayStation Vita video, but this one's a little different. Today I'm not going to be doing any retro gaming, although that'll be a possibility once we're all done. This time I'll be taking you through how to download, install, and set up basic macOS 7.6.1 and macOS 8.1 operating systems on a homebrew-enabled Vita using a port of Basilisk 2. Basilisk 2 is an open-source emulator of the Motorola 68K system used in early Apple Macintosh computers, most notably the Apple II, thus the name. Basilisk 2 is also a mouthful to say, so for most of this I'll be referring to it as Basilisk or the emulator. Basilisk 2 was initially released in 1999 and was in active development until its final 1.0 revision 5 release in 2006. Since then, ports have been made and updated for virtually every popular operating system, and even some weird ones like BOS, and of course the PSP and Vita thanks to GitHub users MeatPatty and RSN8887. Before you dive in, I recommend heading over to the Basilisk 2 Vita port page on GitHub and at least skimming the README page. There's a ton of information there that'll help you get up and running, and it's not overly technical. The default map controls make the system pretty usable right out of the box, and if you're really motivated, you could even pair Bluetooth keyboard and mouse. If you do try to go to the Bluetooth route, some peripherals work with the Vita and some don't. I've tried a handful of Bluetooth keyboards, and only a Logitech keyboard from an iPad cover worked well enough to be usable. Alright, now that I've given you the read the manual spiel, let's get started. Download the VPK using a homebrew installer or from the releases link on RSN8887's fork of the Basilisk 2 Vita port. The current version as of this video is 0.33H. Next, find a sturdy charger because this is going to take a while. Over on the PC we'll need to download a few things. First, software to work with Macintosh disk images. For this, the most reliable thing I know of is HFV Explorer from 1999. Thankfully, the page is still up as of this video, whenever I get it finished, but your mileage may vary. Next, we'll need to get copies of macOS. Head over to the Internet Archive or to one of my favorite repositories of ancient software, WinWorld PC. And if you find their site as useful as I do and have the means, throw them a little donation to keep their tubes full. The Internet's become a much smaller place in recent years, and we can't count on the Internet Archive to keep everything saved. So the final version of macOS supported by the 68K class of CPU was 8.1. So that's the last one that's usable with the emulator. You can find the download and mirror links at the bottom of the WinWorld PC page. For macOS 7, I'll be using the macOS 7.6.1 ISO. You'll also need a ROM file ripped from a real Mac 68K based computer, and should in no way be looking at what I'm doing on the screen right now. Absolutely do not follow what I'm doing on the screen. Now that you've got your real, legitimate Performa or Quadra ROM ripped from your real, legitimate Mac hardware, we can get on with our other downloads. Extract the ISO files from the archives and then load up HFV Explorer. We're going to be using HFV Explorer to create a couple of Macintosh hard disk images for our OS installations, but don't worry, it's easier than it sounds. Under the File menu, select New Volume. Name your disk image something that makes sense, and then select the size. I'll be making mine a lot larger than needed. For macOS 7, 200 megabytes is probably plenty. Enter the path to save the disk image in the dialog box, or click the arrow next to it and browse to a location to save the file. Enter your file name and you're done. For the macOS 8 disk, repeat the same steps. Again, I'm making the disk a lot larger than needed. For OS 8, you could probably get away with 300 megabytes and still plenty of room left over. Next, you're going to need to copy three things to your Vita. Copy the macOS hard disk images to the data/basilisk2/hard files directory. Next, copy your Macintosh 68K ROM to the data/basilisk2/roms directory. And then copy your installation ISOs to the data/basilisk2/cd-rom directory. Now we'll open up the emulator on the Vita and configure some initial options. Under the memory menu, I'm going to be using 24 megabytes of RAM, a Mac model ID set to Quadra 900, CPU type of 68040, and using a Quadra ROM. In the Volumes menu, select Boot from CD up top. Next, select the macOS 7 hard disk image we created earlier. Finally, under CD-ROM, select the OS 7 installation ISO. Under the Vita specific options menu, you can select an option up top to increase the Vita's clock speed to maximum. This will consume more battery, but you're going to want to be plugged into the wall for a lot of this anyway, since it could take an hour or more depending on the speed of your SD card. You can also properly configure your display settings under the graphics and sound menu. Set your resolution to the Vita's native 960 by 544 and high color. I misconfigured something before recording the video, and unfortunately by the time I'd noticed it, I was midway through the install. Head back to the main menu and then hit circle to start the emulator. With any luck, in a couple seconds you'll see a smirking macOS startup screen. The startup will take a few minutes, but once things are up and running you'll be dropped onto a desktop with a couple of icons visible. Use the touchscreen or the joystick and then click the icon labeled macOS 7.6.1 if the installation CD doesn't automatically open. Click Install macOS 7.6.1 from the base directory of the installation CD. Then click through and ignore any important information, and then skip updating the hard disk drivers. On the third option, select your macOS hard disk image created earlier. Finally hit 4 and select which components of macOS 7.6.1 you want to install. I definitely recommend the text-to-speech package. You can skip installing a lot of network options if you feel like, since this port of the emulator doesn't support networking. Once the software selections and installation options are set, you're ready to go. Hit start and make sure your Vita is plugged in. Find a copy of the Snyder Cut or the extended Lord of the Rings, your favorite book, do some laundry, call your parents. This is going to take a while. The OS 7.6.1 installation took about 90 minutes on my system to complete. Once it's done, you can hit quit to restart the emulator, or continue if you want to browse around the macOS 7 installation disk. If you do choose to loiter around, remember to properly shut down your fake Macintosh by going to the special menu and selecting shutdown. Since our OS 7 installation is done, we'll want to make sure that we're booting from the hard disk image again. Under the volume menu, change the boot device back to any, and unselect the OS 7 ISO by entering the menu and then exiting without selecting a new image. Although if you do have any software you'd like to install, you can mount the image here. I mounted an ISO of Stuffit Expander, a file compression suite. It'll be handy in the future for unpacking other software I want to install. So head back to the main menu and then start the emulator up again with the circle button, and then wait. The initial startup is going to take a few minutes. It may seem like the system froze, but you should be able to move the cursor a little bit. After a few minutes, you'll see a rebuilding the desktop screen, and then once that's completed, it'll be dropped onto the OS 7 desktop. So taking a poke around, it really does look and feel pretty much like a real System 7 Mac. And while I've got the system running, I may as well install some handy software. So let's go through the Stuffit Expander setup. Programs interacting with the file system tend to be pretty slow, so rather than wait as it churns away, I'll use the magic of time shifting. macOS 8.1 is going to be installed pretty much the same way as macOS 7. Under the memory menu, select a model ID like a Quadra 900, a 68040 CPU, and a Quadra or Performa ROM. For the OS 8 install, change your hard disk image file to the empty OS 8 image we created earlier on the PC. Mount the OS 8.1 installation ISO as your CD, and switch your boot device to CD-ROM. Head back to the main menu and hit the circle button to boot up the emulator once again. After a few minutes, you should see that cheerful little bugger again. After a little bit of a longer wait, you should get your macOS 8 desktop and see a disk icon mounted for the installation CD. Click it and then hit Install macOS 8.1. The process is similar to OS 7. Select your disk, click some agreements, and then choose your installation options. Since there's no networking in this port, you can skip a few of the software choices, but you may want to install some of the web stuff like Java Runtime and of course text-to-speech. Again, this is going to take a long time, so you'll probably want to be tethered to a charger. The OS 8 installation took probably about another 90 minutes or so from start to finish on my system. Once the installation is complete, browse around the install CD or shut the system down using the special menu. Start the emulator up again with the circle button and let things turn away for a few more minutes. Your first boot and desktop rebuild might take another 5 minutes or so. After that, you can go through the OS 8 Setup Assistant to configure your virtual Macintosh system. And unfortunately, this is where I ran out of disk space for recording. So rather than ramble on even more, I'll spend some time fiddling around in OS 8. The ending here shows what it'll look like with the proper resolution and high color depth set. With the CPU running at maximum and the mouse sensitivity increased a little, Basilisk 2 runs pretty well on the Vita. Text-to-speech on OS 8 is still a little choppy, but I haven't really spent a lot of time optimizing or tweaking the install. If you've tried the emulator on the PSP or the Vita, or have some recommendations on iconic 68K era software I should play with, let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching.